Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. We already had most part of our evening with a Hack the Box Q&A on Discord. But now we have a presentation by two awesome guys from our community um, here live streamed on YouTube. Let me grab them. Here's Martin and here's Martijn.
Hi guys.
Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Thanks.
You're going to entertain us this evening with your presentation about the research and incident response that you've done. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself before we get started?
Yeah, sure. We will introduce ourselves when we start with the presentation. We have
There's a slide for
some.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a slide for
We're
it.
kind of screwing up the whole workflow
Oh,
we had in
sorry.
mind, so that's always the case.
It's another Dutch word. Je maakt het gras van mijn voeten weg.
Maybe that's a good one for the next round of the Dutch things.
You mowed the lawn under my feet.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, well then we'll just let you get to the presentation. I will move myself from the stream, and it is all yours. Go ahead.
Thanks, Arjen. Good evening, everybody. We are so excited that we are going to do this presentation for you. And we want to talk with you about a incident response we have done recently during the founded zero-day vulnerabilities affecting Exchange, the Microsoft Exchange server. And we were talking about Dutch words a couple of minutes ago, and this was another Dutch word for us. This incident response, this incident response was a different cook for us.
Cookie. Yeah.
Yeah, different cookie. So, but before we're gonna start with the presentation, we want to introduce ourselves for you. Let's test if it's working. Yes. Well, Martijn, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Let me kick off. That's no problem at all. The video is screwing up a little bit here, but it doesn't matter for me. Okay, so I'm Martijn, also known as Dopamine, here on Hack the Box, and I'm the team lead of the Security Advisory Center at the company Martin and I work at. Besides managing the team, I'm also a cybersecurity specialist and ethical hacker in free time. So I think that would suit most of the people in here at least. So that's the part for me. You're up, Martin.
Yes, thanks. I will call you Dopamine for this presentation.
Will do.
Yes, my name is Martin. I'm a IT security engineer at the same company, working with Martijn, try to prevent companies being hacked, and when they are under attack, we try to repel the attack and find the traces which the hacker had leaked on the system, and repair the system when it's damaged, and make the internet a safer place. And in the free time, I'm a ethical hacker and doing some bug bounty hunting.
Making the world a safer place, that was a kind of contradiction when we look at the whole Exchange vulnerability part. But then again, a nice subject to talk about. Hope you guys are into this.
Yes, so shall we start Dopamine, or do you want to have some other starting words?
No, let's do this.
Well, nice. I hope that the presentation is working. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the zero-day vulnerability got exploited by a attack group called Hafnium. It's called by Microsoft. They gave this word to the threat actor. And before we dive in the technical details of the founded vulnerabilities, we will look at Hafnium. So when the zero-day vulnerabilities were found, Microsoft was investigating these vulnerabilities, and they attributes this attack to Hafnium, a threat actor believed to be a nation-state sponsored group, not everybody is happy with that. That it's a nation-state sponsored group, but for now we leave it as it is. This group was exploiting those zero-day vulnerabilities and was primarily operating from the United States, from leased virtual private servers, and was primarily targeting in infection disease researchers, law firms, and higher education institutions, defense contractors, political think tanks, and NGOs. And when you look at how this threat actor was working, they were exploiting those zero-day vulnerabilities, dropping web shells on the machines. And when Microsoft was announced by these vulnerable zero-day vulnerabilities, they released an out-of-band security patches in order to prevent further infiltration.
But that's something we see regularly. The out-of-bounds are mostly incidental. I think I can't imagine we had one last year. I think one of the last was around the whole crypto locker thing stuff in 2017.
It's a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, you're right. And while Microsoft had released those out-of-band security patches to prevent further infiltration, when the web shells are already dropped on the machines, the threat actor has already persistent on that machine. And there was a very hard working for all the system engineers and security engineers to walk through the systems to clean them out. And until and in the same time when Microsoft had released the security patches, more threat actors were abusing those vulnerable zero-day vulnerabilities to their advantage. So when we look to it from above, Hafnium was exploiting the zero-day vulnerabilities, was dropping web shells. Microsoft released patches, and there was an ongoing access when the patches are installed. And in the meantime, more threat actors are abusing those zero-day vulnerabilities.
Yeah, the last time it was almost 10, if I'm not mistaken, 10 different APTs using this same vulnerability and using the payloads, even using each other's web shells to gain persistence and deleting things from the other parties as well. So it was a whole web shell heaven we had around that.
Yeah, it is. Well, I'm now going to the second page in the presentation, and I think that the screen is...
It loads a bit slow, but I can see it coming up now.
Okay. Well, let's start with the timeline, Dopamine. Can you tell something about it?
Yeah, sure. If you look at this, the funny part is when we skip a bit forward, we could see that the vulnerability got tracked around March. That was also the time Microsoft released the out-of-band update. But if we look at the full timeline, we could see the first possible exploitations of these vulnerabilities in Microsoft Exchange starting at November last year. So that kind of indicates the fact that when we all knew worldwide that there was an issue in Exchange and that there were patches to install, we were like at least 5 months late. So that kind of shows the why Microsoft launched the out-of-band updates, because it wasn't there wasn't time to patch. There was simply an ongoing attack on all those machines as well. So if you take a look at the whole timeline, we see the first, and that's mainly Hafnium, doing the first exploitation of those CVEs, especially the one mentioned here, 26855. And around between December and January, there was a security party called DevCore who discovered the pre-authentication proxy vulnerability. And that's the interesting part around these attacks. You can see they misused a whole chain of different CVEs, different vulnerabilities, to gain access to those machines. Well, if you guys, I'm not sure if everybody knows what Microsoft Exchange is, but it's the email and collaboration suite Microsoft provides for people to install on-premise or in just on a server. And it's kind of always internet facing in a way. So when you have the vulnerabilities on a Microsoft Exchange server, it's scary because everyone worldwide usually can connect to those machines. So The first confirmed exploitation of these CVEs was observed in January, but at this moment there are still stories that even in September 2020 there were exploitations already being done. People are still discussing about that, but it could even be longer than that. So the first confirmed exploitation was around January the 3rd, and Microsoft acknowledges the vulnerability in January 5th. So that was already at the start of the new year that Microsoft knew the vulnerability was there. The fact that we only knew later is, for example, Rapid7, a security vendor, supplier of toolings, for example, Metasploit. They detected widespread scanning and possible exploitation of it, and that was around 27 February. So we were already months later in that year, before people start knowing and feeling that there was the exploit was misused. So eventually, and that's where the whole story kind of starts, Microsoft publicly disclosed the vulnerability on March 2nd. That was also for us the moment we received the advisories from Microsoft, and especially the out-of-bound updates accompanied with that. So if we take a look at the March, we see three bullets in there. We have March the 2nd, the publicly disclosure of the vulnerability. Microsoft always pre-announce those before the updates get released. A few days later, we saw Microsoft release mitigation advice and indicators of compromise. So there was already some time between the whole world knowing it and the availability of information around it. And around March 9, we saw the first public proof of concept exploits being launched. But then again, when assembling the whole timeline, we already knew that it was ongoing for months. So Microsoft eventually released an updated tools and investigation guidance, and that was around March 16. And that was the kind of time we were all very busy, if I'm not mistaken, Martin. I don't know how your weekend was, but if I can recall correctly, we were all working like crazy around that time. So this is just a short timeline to have an idea when the initial possible Hafnium activity took place. And eventually other APTs start using it. And what we now know, around 10 different APTs were fighting for exchange shells around that time. So that's in a nutshell the timeline of the whole vulnerability disclosure and proof of concept and guidance by Microsoft eventually.
Yeah, it was a very busy time for us, for all of us in that weekend. So if we going to look at the technical details of the zero-day vulnerabilities, there were 4 zero-day vulnerabilities found in Microsoft Exchange Server on-premise.
There's a funny one. Sorry for interrupting, Martin, but I see something in the chat, and that really it's a really fun one from Rombero. They were all fighting to have first blood, and that's why I just wanted to share with you and interrupt your story. But I find that one very funny, so I had to put that one in. So a thumbs up for that one. Yeah,
yeah, that's really funny, and it was really fighting for first blood for them. And now I'm do some fast forwarding in our presentation, but some servers we saw 6, 7, 8, 9 web shells on that machine, so they were all fighting for first blood, but there's only one with first blood. So if you're going to look to the technical details, they found that vulnerabilities. The first one is a server-side request forgery vulnerability in Exchange, which allowed the attacker to send arbitrary HTTP request and authenticate as the Exchange server. This was also the most dangerous one from all the vulnerabilities, because after the server-side request forgery exploitation, the attacker had gained system access as a system user. So, and from that point, he can misuse the other zero-day vulnerabilities, like the second one, CVE 2021-26857, which is an insecure deserialization vulnerability in the unified messaging service. And this insecure deserialization is where untrusted user controllable data is deserialized by a program. And exploiting this vulnerability gave the Hafnium the ability to run code as system on the Exchange server. And the second one is imposed authentication arbitrary fail right vulnerability in Exchange. And also the fourth one is also imposed authentication arbitrary fail right vulnerability in Exchange. So all those vulnerabilities were affecting the Microsoft Exchange servers from 2010 to 2019. The interesting thing is, Microsoft Exchange Online was not affected. Microsoft saw that the attackers tried to exploit Exchange Online, tried to attack their servers, but they were unsuccessful, and those vulnerabilities were not applicable for Exchange Online servers.
It's always kind of funny to see that Exchange 2010 got hit by the vulnerability, which is way old.
Yeah.
And when you start investigating, it's always fun to see how many companies are still using Exchange 2010, which is even out of support from Microsoft for years now. So talking about security, the fact if you're vulnerable or not, if you're running Exchange 2010, you might have other problems. So that's they got some work to do for that.
Yeah. You see it very regularly that older operating systems and software is still being used. For example, a colleague of us, Dopamine, was at the hospital today, and he was sitting next to the doctor, and he saw that he was typing on a Windows XP machine.
Oh man!
So
I think a lot of ATM machines in the United States are still running Windows XP. They're not unique in that, but I think that's not the way to go these times. Yeah.
So if we look at the exploitation path, you see all of the attacks which were observed started with the initial exploitation of the most severe vulnerability to authenticate against the Exchange server without credentials. And if the threat actor has access to the machine, has a foothold on the machine through this vulnerability, the attacker drops web shells in multiple folders using a 1 or 2 0-day vulnerabilities. And then as a system user, the threat actor was able to execute PowerShell commands on that machine to download PowerCat or Nishang to establish a reverse shell or establish a connection to the command and control server. And we do also in this presentation 2 case studies. And the first one is the attacker was at this stage, the second stage. When the threat actor has access to the machine, he was able to dump credentials from LSAS using procdump. And my question for you, Dopamine, why they could also use Mimikatz, but why are they using procdump?
Yeah, what you see is that Mimikatz get flagged very fast by antivirus and especially EDR solutions, which run endpoint detection and response. What you see going on now is that they use more the living of the land binary. So when you use tools already in the operating system or digitally signed by Microsoft, for example, from sysinternals, it's way more easy to grab those dumps without the risk of being detected. So if you have nice signed, certified and a green check mark executables from Microsoft, it's way better to use those on production machines than, for example, Mimikatz.
Yeah, so they were using Microsoft tools against us.
Yep. So
when the threat actor has access on the machine, he can dump street credentials or pivot around on the machine and dump the Outlook address book, extract email addresses from it, and can using it for sophisticated phishing attacks. Was also observed by companies that email boxes got exported to PSD files, and then the attacker, when the attacker has access to the machine, he can walks in parallel path. So you can do a analysis on the already gathered information by exporting the PXT files, and through the credentials he had, he can move laterally further in the network and look for another important target or information on that network. So for those companies, it was a huge problem when they found indicators of compromise, that the attacker or threat actor was on their machines or had gained access on the machines. And to exfil the information from out the machine, we have seen, and you will talk about it, Dopamine, in your case study, that the threat actor tries to compress the information in zip file archives and then try to exfiltrate those data in archives through CAP files. And we will look further on that in your case study later in this presentation.
Yep, we have some nice examples of that.
Yeah, so let's start with our timeline. Dopamine, can you start on this?
Yeah, sure. I think we had the timeline until March, which gave some indicators of what happened before. Looking at things we encountered from our position as the blue team in this case, it started around March 2nd. So one of the first things we saw was the Microsoft Advanced notification to our security team. As a Microsoft partner, we always receive those notifications from Microsoft when they announce new updates coming up. That's usually a week before the normal updates cycle. But in this case, it was a day before, and the updates were even released the same day. So Microsoft advised all customers to just patch. And we call it in Nederlands niet lullen, maar patchen. Don't bullshit, just update. But that was kind of the story from Microsoft. We also joined an online meeting with the team there and just say, okay, guys, start running, just update. And given the fact it was an out-of-bound cycle, that really puts 10 points on it, knowing that it's a serious game then. So we got the published security patches, and the first thing we started to do is prep the team the day after, because they released late in the evening. We prepped the team and just discussed our strategy. But then again, it's not weird for Microsoft to release those updates. You know that from your own experience. They just sent an email every month saying, hey guys, we got around 60 to 80 new security leaks, just update and your whole life will be better. So we kind of read the advisory, found that there was some critical vulnerabilities. But the weird part is that Microsoft didn't accentuate the fact that it was widely being attacked and it was very likely to be attacked. If I'm not mistaken, we have a slide later on just saying it's yes, more likely to be attacked, but that in Microsoft terms is meh, you still don't have to start running. So yeah, we send an security advisory to our own colleagues, our own teams, for our customers. You guys, there's an update. We say update fast. Just inform the customers, make an appointment for downtime, and just update it. A bit of normal interval on that. But that was we just did our thing. We analyzed it. Everybody was happy, and all the teams start working and planning their schedules. But then how they say it, the shit hit the fan around that time, and then we're looking at March 5th and 6th.
Yeah, it was for us. We thought we had everything under control, and on March the 5th, it was starting. The antivirus was giving us notifications out of one specific customer that something was going wrong, and we would jump into that in a couple of minutes. First, we received the advanced notification from Microsoft, and we receive those advanced notifications regularly from Microsoft. Every month, new security patches got released. Also, this one. Only this one was a little bit different than the other one, because there was a security update release out of band for critical Exchange server vulnerabilities. Normally, when out-of-band patches got released, there's something horribly wrong on the machines of Microsoft or with their software. But
Or both.
or both. But for us, it was just another day at the office. Just again, a vulnerability found in Microsoft Exchange. So we will not start to be panicking or something. And Microsoft had published a blog about it. And as already mentioned, those advanced notifications, we see it every month. And okay, we have read the information. We know, okay, there are 0-day vulnerabilities. And we always look at the most likely, or not most likely, exploitation is, do we have to run, or can we update those systems on the next patch management moment? And Microsoft has told in their blog the attack on premises versions of Microsoft Exchange Server they saw in limited and targeted attacks.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah. So we thought, okay, no panic, nothing wrong. We will update the next around all the Exchange servers. The interesting is the Exchange Online servers are not affected. Also, this blog told, so we knew we have only to focus on the Exchange on-premise machines. This was on March the 2nd. March the 3rd, we received a email message from Microsoft, and we are invited to join their Microsoft security team for Exchange out-of-band customer briefing call. And in the evening from March 2nd to March the 3rd, we followed the news and some forums, and from that moment I got a feeling that there's something wrong. Everybody was talking about it, and on some forum posts I saw messages that our customers are widely being attacked through those 0-day vulnerabilities. So from that moment in the evening, we know, okay, I think we have to do something. And on March the 3rd, we received this invitation. So I've joined the briefing call, and the Microsoft engineer in that call was not panicking, but every question he received, he answered with, "Oh, no talking, patch, just patch all of the machines. They're widely being attacked, all the Exchange servers, so you have to patch now." So, wow. So there is panic in the house, so we have to run now. So on the same day, we have arranged a security meeting with our team, Dopamine.
Yeah.
And can you talk something about that?
Yeah, what we usually do, just guys, to give you some feeling, since we're on the blue team in this on this daily business, for us, the first thing we do is discuss the contents of the advisory, just to make sure we're all on the same page, we all have the same advisory, and to give you a little bit a view in the kitchen, as we say in Dutch. This is the way we do it. So we analyze it, we give the go to the organization, and we tell our colleagues on the support teams what the next action should be. And we send an advisory, which you have a bit of a sample here, just to give you an idea. So for us, we analyzed it. We took the advice from Microsoft just to patch. And we send it to our colleagues, and normally they will plan the maintenance with the customers, and everything works out fine, and all the servers get patched in time. But then again, this is one different story from this point on. Maybe the next one gives some slight indication, Tinus.
Yeah. After we have released this security advisory, I can still feel the feeling we had on that moment, Dopamine. Okay, we have analyzed those vulnerabilities. We know what to do. Patch. We have released a security advisory to our managed teams, and they answered back, okay, we are planning directly the updates. We start updating directly. So
felt
we
like
thought,
in control. Yeah, business as usual.
Yeah. So we have everything
at that
in
moment
control.
it did.
Yeah. We know what's going wrong. We have to run. And so from March the 4th, it was a little bit quiet. The managed teams were patching all of those servers, or helping organizations by patching those servers. But on March the 5th, in the evening, our support teams received a call from a customer. We were not actively managing that customer. The customer of that company was managing everything by himself, and when he got stuck or had a complex problem, then they call our consultants. Then we drop in and help them. So he was calling Friday in the evening. Our consulting engineer said, "Well, I have received a notification from my antivirus, and it's just notification, giving notification every time. So what do I need to do?" Well, our consulting assistant was talking to Noel. "What do you see?" "Well, there's something being blocked on my system." "Oh, well, that's good. When your antivirus is blocking or quarantine some malware, that's okay." "Yes," he told, "but this is an Exchange server." And for that moment, the consultant was, "Oh, well, we know from the security advisory, from the security team, there's something wrong on the Exchange server." So he was directly jumping in on this case, starting a full scan on the server, the manual scan and the real-time scan, and both have found some malware, as you can see here in the screenshot, and was first blocking it, quarantine it, and second, it was again blocking all of the malware. And it was late in the evening that our customer had called our teams. So they thought, okay, everything is blocked, nothing wrong here. So keep working, and we will see on Monday on your machine if there is something still strange going on.
Yeah, that was a kind of funny part because the customer didn't have a support contract or anything else, and they didn't want to pay a fee in the weekend because, if you need consultants in the weekend, you pay more than during the daytime. So he was like, "Yeah, sure, no, just disconnect the Exchange server. We will look Monday. I don't need email in the weekend." And we were like, "Okay, are you sure you want that?" "Yeah, sure, just connect it, and we'll see about it." That was a reaction I didn't expect at that time, to be honest.
No, that's true. And on March the 6th, it was on Saturday, I was drinking a cup of coffee with my parents, and the teams was calling us that we have again our customer on the phone, and it still received messagings from the antivirus that something was going wrong. And we have unplugged the machine. We have not shutting it down, but we have unplugged the network cards. So machine is now without internet. The customer didn't want to pay for a weekend fee, so you can work on it on Monday. But no, the machine is unplugged from the internet. That was on 1600 hours in the afternoon, if I remember correctly, Dopamine.
Yeah, that's correct.
And can you take it from then?
Yeah, sure. I think if I'm not mistaken, you had a bit of confirmation with the guys over there, and then there was some time at ease, and it's always in the weekend or late in the afternoon. I don't know why that is, because we're always lucky around that one. But I can remember that I got called again, and I spoke to the person, and we started to check out that machine, because even though the customer didn't want to pay extra money for it and wanted to put it to Monday, it didn't feel right. So I just wanted to make sure to know what happened, so we had a bit of feeling about the scope of the whole issue. So I started investigating that Exchange server, and I quickly got a feeling that this was something to do related to the 0 day, and then made the call just to scale up. And that's the moment when I also called Tinus and some other colleagues. Just like, "Yo guys, I know for sure that something is wrong, and since we only have a limited amount of Exchange servers still running, and because most of the people are cloud-based these days, I just made the call to just check all those machines preactively to make sure there isn't something fishy going on, or the antivirus isn't detecting the same things." So I know that when we start looking at the machine, the first thing I saw is there were a whole lot of web shells being deployed already. At that moment, when we start investigating all the other machines, we also found out that it doesn't really matter if you patched it or not, that maybe the initial vulnerability was closed, but a lot of machines were already infected even before Microsoft released those patches. So for us, the scope and the intensity of this case immediately started to grow. And we knew that we had to up our game and just check all the machines to be sure. And that's when we start finding a whole lot of shells on all different kind of machines, even machines patched around 2-3 minutes after the initial patches got released. So that was kind of, that was heavy shit. So for us, the next thing we started to do is see if a customer has an on-premise Exchange server, because even though it's weekends, normally you have all your colleagues there. We just started to check. And if they had Exchange Online, there was no action needed since they were protected by Microsoft already. But if they had an Exchange on-premise, and even Exchange 2010, which is end of life for years now, we knew we had to take some action. So we started investigating and see if customers had endpoint detection and response installed. Just I mentioned earlier on, finding things like that with antivirus, it normally only says, hey, I blocked something, but knowing where the threat comes from, you just need additional tooling. So we started to proactively install EDR to just have a more view around what happens on those machines and get telemetry from them. And then make sure the patches were already installed. Even though we said, guys, just patch. The customer decides if the machine can have downtime or not. And some customers rely so much on email, we didn't get the green light to update them. So in the weekend, we didn't even ask the customers anymore. We just updated them, rebooted them without telling them in front, just to make sure they were protected at that moment. And then we started doing checks for the indicators of compromise. Since we already knew the web shells could be deployed, Hafnium was known for data exfiltration, which could be found in different log files. And we already knew that even though data exfiltration is an option, ransomware deployment was also an option. There were also groups like TIC involved, and there's an APT. TIC is known for deploying ransomware, for example. So we had to immediately start investigating all the Exchange machines, make sure the guys install the patches, check all the machines, check for indicators of compromise, and start cleaning up the machines who got hit in the initial attacks. So that was a nice start of the whole weekend. I can remember that.
It was a weekend of hard working. The nice
lots of coffees.
Yeah, and it was we were working with two teams. We as IT security engineers, and our engineers from the managed teams was also working. And I can still feel that team effort we had on that moment. They were
that was nice. That was nice.
Yeah. They were coming in, and they know we have to do something, but you're security engineers. What do we have to do? Our customers got attacked. What is our action plan?
There was a bit of panic among the guys then. Yeah,
and it's fully understandable. And so it was hard working, but we've managed to fix those problems. But this was on Saturday, March the 6th. So on Sunday there was nothing to do more. But on Monday, on March 8 March, there was still a customer with an Exchange server without connected NICs, and there was still investigation needed.
Yeah, we cleaned up around, if I'm not mistaken, 7 or 8 Exchange servers and 2 clusters, if I'm not mistaken, from that time on. So we had the feeling everything was under control. Those clients were safe. The indicators of compromise were checked. And the machines were clean, the web shells were gone, and there was no weird stuff coming from the EDR solution. So that kind of felt like all was in control, except for that one machine.
Yeah,
the Monday morning machine.
Yeah, yeah. Only this machine. It was so on Monday in the morning we start with investigating the server. It was a Microsoft Exchange 2013 machine. It was fully patched. It had the latest cumulative update installed, and the reason for that is the first security patches which are being released by Microsoft were only applicable for the latest CU update. So every customer had to update their Exchange server in order to install the security patch. And on this machine, the security patch was already installed, had the latest update, Windows was fully up to date, and still the antivirus was giving error messages. On Monday, we start on this machine. And if we look back to one of our first slides, it was started with the 0-day exploitation. The web shells were dropped. It was an ongoing access, and our investigation starts here. The security patch was already installed, and there was still ongoing access on that machine.
There is a question coming up. Sorry for bothering you, Tinus. I just see one coming up. Someone is asking, how did you discover the web shells? So that's actually a very good question. One of the things we had is a bit of nice threat intelligence. Props to Microsoft for this one. They had some good threat intel, which already mentioned some locations where shells were found previously in the Hafnium attacks. That was a starting point for us. The plus point is we know Exchange, so we know the places where those shells could also be placed, since Exchange had a lot of web server functionality built in. So that was for us the starting point of the investigation. And even in the base directory from Internet Information Services, there were already shells found. So when you know they're there, you know the names, and you know how they look or what they contain, it makes searching for them a whole lot of easier. And there are only a few limited directories within Exchange Server which can host web files, for that matter. So for us, that was the starting point, the Microsoft Intel, to find those web shells.
Yeah, and I think we have skipped that part, Dopamine. Microsoft had also released a PowerShell script, which is searching automatically for known indicators of compromise and looking for the automatically on location where web shells could be placed.
Yeah, normally they don't do that, so that was a very welcome addition to the whole incident response this time.
Yeah, there were also another security companies releasing their IOC scripts, so we have used two of them, and we will talk about them later on in this presentation. Our situation on March 8, we were start working on this machine, and I was starting and looking to the antivirus notifications. And from that moment, I knew, okay, I think this is more complex than we thought initial. So I've called you, Dopamine, and Eric, our other security colleague. He's, I think, not here in this meetup right now.
No.
But he was also working on this case. As already told, it's not a organization we actively managing, so we do not have connections to their system. So we use TeamViewer to get a remote access to that Exchange server. We were in a Microsoft Teams conversation. We were still in a lockdown here in the Netherlands, so we were all working from our homes, and still a customer with, little panicking. My server is still offline. I need access to my email as soon as possible. So please fix this problem. So we were, you was Dopamine getting threat intel to get more information. The threat intelligence you have gathered from several forums and other places. You've dropped that information in the Microsoft Teams conversation. I was doing the stuff on the machine and getting the information back to the Teams conversation, and we were all three analyzing all of that information we found on that machine, correlated with founded threat intel, and Eric was calling with our antivirus vendor for more information, and I will talk about that in the next slide. And he was trying to get more EDR licenses because we knew there was something wrong in this environment, on this Exchange server. We want to deploy EDR on our costs now on all of the servers to get more in-depth information in the network. So we start the investigation here. As you can see, the antivirus was blocking PowerShell. And this antivirus module had a antivirus which is scanning all of the system files, but it's also scanning the random access memory. And the module which is using the random access is monitoring the random access memory is blocking a PowerShell script. And this is the reason why our colleague Eric was calling with our AV vendor. the module is only showing that it had blocked something, and our AV vendor has the in-depth information why the PowerShell is being blocked. He was calling with them to get some more information. So
that was a bit of a downside on the traditional antivirus. It just detects the fact that it found a PowerShell doing something nasty and just block it. But you don't get enough insight in what the root cause of the whole PowerShell isn't a problem. Something is triggering PowerShell to execute something, especially nowadays in memory. And that's the thing, you just need to know what is being launched in memory from where. And that was the part the antivirus didn't detect. Only the fact that it got blocked. So that was a bit of a hassle.
Yeah, it was. And we get another problem with dopamine, because we had deployed EDR on the system. And what was happening with EDR?
Yeah, you know those days that just everything goes down the drain, and we deployed EDR, which normally activates within 2 minutes and giving us insight in all the telemetry. And yeah, it does take some time before you have everything, but it's really fast, Norma. But at that time there was an issue with communication between the EDR agents and the backend portal we use. So EDR was running, but no, we didn't see anything coming in as data wasn't processed to the backend. So the whole EDR story that really sounded like the solution to make sure we all were ready for beer that evening, but it kind of worked against us, and we had to manually start digging to find the root cause of this. But we did have fun though.
Yeah. It was, the fun part was at the end of the evening, but
not at that time.
It was, this server is under attack. Antivirus is seeing some strange behaviors, blocking PowerShell script. You want to have more inside information, in-depth information on the machine, what is happening, and the endpoint detection and response software is running, but our dashboard is empty. It's not showing information. So
the idea was good, good idea, bad execution.
So we knew from this information it's a fileless attack, because PowerShell was blocked in the memory. So we start at the beginning. Let's check for web shells on the server, and we found one web shell on this machine. It was our first indicator of compromise related to the Exchange 0-day vulnerabilities. Because it's an Exchange server, we know that something is wrong. We assume it is related to the 0-day vulnerabilities, but you need to find evidence that your assumption is the truth, because it could also be something different. And from here we knew, it's this machine is being attacked through the 0-day vulnerability. So this was our first indicator of compromise. And there were web shells dropped on this machine, Dopamine. Can you talk your experiences with the web shell?
Yeah, that was kind of funny. The first thing we did is we knew the names were commonly used names from the threat intel from Microsoft. So what I did is I just ran those shells through VirusTotal and just grabbed the hash and see if there were known shells. And the funny part was at that time, thankfully it's now better, but there were only 4, if I'm not mistaken, 7 vendors tagging that web shell as being malicious and recognizing it as being part of a web shell or a known web shell. So it was, for example, Microsoft. Well, that's not a real surprise since they already found the fact that it was their Exchange server. But almost all other vendors didn't detect it yet. And for me, one of the indicators to look further and recognize the web shell was the fact that Microsoft then used the name the China Chopper, which is, if I'm not mistaken, a web shell from years back. But that resurfaced again. Microsoft now has it named differently, but at that time that China Chopper name was the name to go for the web shells. So running a few of those shells eventually gave the same, but there were also some shells which weren't recognized at all by VirusTotal yet. So that kind of gave us the feeling that it was more than one APT group using those shells. And that proved to be right at the end, given the fact that there were around 10 APTs all having a shell party on those machines worldwide.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the China Chopper shell was discovered initial in 2012, I think.
Yeah, 2012, 2013. That was some of the first times the China Shopper shell was used. So it didn't sound like something new. And the weird part is, why the hell isn't it detected broadly by all those vendors? So I think something changed in the files itself or the way they presented it. But then again, it was a known web shell, and normally web shells aren't that complicated by structure.
Yeah, and this is also the reason why the antivirus has not actively blocking this web shell. It's only blocking some behavior what he saw in the random access memory later in the process. So that's also at the end of the presentation we come to some conclusions, and one of them is you need EDR, and this is
one of the examples.
Yeah, this is proof that you need it. So. As already told, Microsoft had released a PowerShell script, the test proxy logon.ps1.
Man, that was a time saver, this one.
Yeah. That's for true. The screenshot here was not a screenshot from our moment on that machine, because I was forgetting to take a screenshot from them. So this is a screenshot from a Microsoft video. But our output was almost the same. After running the script, we had our second proof that, okay, this machine is attacked by the zero-day vulnerabilities. There are IOCs found on that machine. And we've also run the second Hafnium IOC script from Soteria Security. And that script is walking through the HTTP proxy logs and other log files from Microsoft Exchange.
Yeah, those logs are huge. I'm not sure if anyone normally works with Exchange, but going through Exchange proxy logs, that's a hassle, because those things are massive. The same as the IIS web logs, for example. You're just finding traces in those log files. Thankfully for this script.
Yeah. So we have now found full evidence that this server is attacked through the zero-day vulnerabilities, and we now still searching for the backdoor, because in the meantime we knew that the AV notification we still received every 45 minutes. The antivirus was popping up on the machine. Hey, I've blocked a PowerShell script in the memory. And we was running this script. Okay, we know there's something on this machine, but where is the backdoor? We were not able to determine the location of this backdoor. And every 45 minutes, there was another notification. So we've installed Wireshark on the machine to know for sure if there is no connection back to the command and control server, so that we can shutting it down. We have run a TCP dump from Netstat to know which open connections are there to the server. And there was nothing there. We couldn't find anything. We was running through the Windows register to searching for information, but you search for something, but for which words are you gonna search?
It was nice to know that there weren't that we didn't find any reverse shells or something active. Well, that was my biggest fear, to find reverse PowerShell shells. So it was nice not finding them. But then again, if you're long enough in IT and you encounter something repeatedly every 45 minutes, you know one thing for sure: it isn't a coincidence. You have a lot of experience to make sure that that's not the case. So it had to be something scheduled.
Yeah, so we have under high pressure we were searching. We have wrote a PowerShell script to walk through all the ASP.NET files and getting the file hashes, compare them with the VirusTotal database, and we've wrote the script, we've started the script, and there was an error popping up. The PowerShell version installed on the server was too old. So we we were not even able to look through PowerShell, use PowerShell to do our stuff. We've also used the command prompt to look for scheduled tasks. We've used PowerShell to look for hidden scheduled tasks, but there was nothing there. We could not find anything. So we were a little bit panicking because EDR was not working, and there is still something going on this machine. So what we know is on that moment is the web shells we found. You have uploaded those web shells to VirusTotal Dopamine, and you saw it's a China Chopper web shell. And can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, it was kind of funny to see how it was incorporated, because people knowing Exchange a bit know that there are some files which have the configuration of the offline address book. That was also the place some of the vulnerabilities were misused. And what we encountered, that there was an ASPX, an ASP.NET web shell being placed, but it was a dump of the installation run by Exchange, the installation parameters. So it kind of looked normal except for the external URI part. That is where we saw that there was a JavaScript injected in that file, which uses the eval function to grab an encoded variable being used in the request to execute a task. So the reason why we found out that there were more than one adversary running the show on those machines is that the request item, for example, the red part in this, here you see a large number, but there were a few which had a readable name, like ananas, which sounds very funny, as pineapple, orange. And so we saw that there mostly was the same request item except for a few, and they were usually a bit later giving the date and time of those web shells. But the whole file looked normal except for the external URL part. And this is how they used an offline address book configuration file with the web shell included, which got served and also worked.
Yeah. So thanks, Dopamine. But we were still searching for the backdoor, and it was almost lunchtime, and we were desperate. I think Dopamine.
It was time for the best step we could take in the whole process. The thing that solves every issue you have normally.
And this was again for us the issue solver. Take a break, okay? Do a walk outside. We agreed to take a break for 45 minutes. We talk our customer. Okay, we know there's something wrong, but we cannot find it right now. So if you do not mind, we will take a break for 45 minutes. It was sunny outside, so we will take a walk and fresh our minds. And we were walking separately from each other. So we agreed not calling each other, just to separately walk outside, clear your minds, and hoping that when we are back, that we have a solution for this issue, because we need to find the back door. And after 30-45 minutes, we came back at our desks and we saw this in our EDR dashboard. EDR was working. We have more information about what's going on this machine, what's happening. So we can now see actually our payload. And this is the payload which is being blocked by the antivirus in the memory. So there is a PowerShell script running, which is downloading a file from an external source and tries to run the file in the memory. It's also a known method to bypass the antivirus is to call PowerShell, open PowerShell, and PowerShell will reserve its own space in the memory. And then in the memory, directly calling PowerShell and execute your script. And then your command will execute it in the memory, and then you have a fileless attack. That's what's happening here. So
You
we
see
now know
sometimes
what's
on the
wrong.
walkthroughs in Hack the Box as well, but I don't know if all people really realize the fact that if you launch PowerShell like this, you don't place the file on disk before running it, which normally triggers antivirus or things like Defender, Microsoft Defender instantly. But using this method, it's always nice to realize what you are doing, and you told it nicely. You are running stuff from memory, and this way you do a lot of evasion for default antivirus, anti-malware solutions.
Yeah,
It
it's
was actually funny, Tinus. I see I'm following the Meetup text as well. You see some guys, for example, Guitar Discord saying, didn't you find it in the event viewer, for example, to see the full process, or use a Process Explorer? So it's kind of funny to see that the advices
we
are the
have
same
run
things
Process
we
Explorer,
checked.
my machine, yeah.
And also nice to see that we checked them, but they didn't show anything. And I think that's mainly because the antivirus immediately killed the process. So the whole child process chain was not visible enough. But yeah, we're still, I like the tips you guys are giving us. We already checked them out, but it's nice to see. We are always see if we can learn something new. So it's good to know we're on the same page there. But yeah, it didn't give us the insights we wanted to see, because we knew what was happening. EDR was working and showed us what was being done. But still, the main question was for us, where the hell does it come from? Because nothing revealed the source yet.
Yeah, and it was also when a program is launched in the security event log, you can see that a program is launched. You can see by who is the program launched. But in this chain, the process was stopped directly, so it was not visible for us in the operating system.
This was the only known part. Yeah.
Yeah, we have executed Process Explorer. We've also run a proc dump to dump all the running processes, but it was it was not there. So after some more reading online and looking for threat intel, we found this payload dopamine. It's the payload is a little bit cut here. It's a very huge one, and I've removed this part because this part is the interesting thing for us. Can you tell us something about this dopamine?
It was nice to see, because the fun part was I found this threat intel online. If I'm not mistaken, it was published by John Hammond from Huntress. A really nice article around Exchange, very good. And there was a lot of information there. And suddenly I got a flashback around a part of code I saw which did something with scheduled task. And the number 45, but it only triggered me when we start seeing the notifications every 45 minutes. So that gave me a flashback to see and read the code, and then we found out that the download string was exactly the same one as we saw being executed by PowerShell. So for me, that was the indicator that the creation of the thing you see in the code is a scheduled task being run as the system user, which has a lot of power on a Microsoft Windows machine, with a schedule run minutes 45, so 45 minutes interval. And it run the download from that cdn.chatcdn. And they found out that there was a persistence payload there to get persistence on the machine as well. But thankfully, it didn't execute because it was blocked. But we also saw that the name of the scheduled task being generated was called WinIt. Not mistakenly WinInit, which kind of looks the same but is different. But it was named WinIt. And that was a new thing for us to start searching. Because scheduled tasks in a Windows platform are usually at the same location. So it was time to check services, scheduled task, task scheduler, command line, things like that, to see if we could find the source. But we had a more targeted feeling where the source of all evil should be in that case. Yeah,
we had already searched in the Windows register for the backdoor, but we didn't know where to look for, and now we know the word is WinIt. So we are coming back to the Windows register and start searching for that string, and it takes a second of 10, 20 seconds, and then boom, there was a winlet on the screen. And from that moment, we knew we have found the backdoor. We have found what we are looking for. I can still feeling the adrenaline rushing through
Or
my
dopamine.
veins.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, dopamine. We were happy, yelling at each other. We found winlet. We have found the backdoor.
For me, it was the first time I found a scheduled task being hidden this far and without seeing it everywhere in the GUI or on the command line as well. So I kind of learned something new there.
Yeah, and you can see the winlet here, and it's pointing to this ID. And here above, we can search for that ID, and we found the backdoor. It was hexadecimal encoded, and we need to, after converting it to a more readable format, we saw it was base 64 encoded. We have to decode it, and then you see the piece of payload we received from this scheduled task, and it was exactly the same payload our EDR software has detected. It was exactly the same payload we found on the blog article from Huntress. So we now knew this is the payload we were looking for. So we have removed this scheduled task, call our customer that everything was done. One day working, we have found the backdoor, and the problem is solved. Oh, we thought. We were done working. It was in the evening. I was having some dinner with my wife and with my kids, and my phone was ringing. And I would pick up the phone, and the system engineer was calling, and that he told me the customer you're working on the backdoor is calling me. So, what's wrong? I said, the antivirus is still giving notifications. I said, what? We have removed the backdoor, so it's gone. No, it's still finding the backdoor. I think, wow, this is not. And what was happening? We were so happy and that we have removed the backdoor, that we find it, that we had forgotten to reboot the server because the task was still in the memory. And you have to reboot the server. We have now removed the initial creation of the task, but we have to remove the task also by rebooting the server.
Yeah, normally it's not needed but due to the fact how it was created, it did require a reboot, and that's one thing we overlooked. So it's nice to see that sometimes you got in cases like this, you learn a whole lot of new stuff.
Yeah, indeed. So we've rebooted the server. And I've monitored the server the whole evening, and everything was clean after rebooting. And then a couple of days later, for me it was very happy to hear this. Our customer received a email message from another security company with the information, hey, we have reverse engineered some malware from VirusTotal, and the name of your email server is in the founded malware. So we think that your machine is exploited through the zero-day vulnerabilities.
Least actively targeted.
Yeah, least actively targeted. And they have used the China Chopper web shell. We know it for sure. So you have to do some instant response. So our customer had forwarded the email message to me. And he was saying, hey, you have to see this. So I've read the email message, and the part what the cybersecurity company had found in the VirusTotal malware was exactly the same information we found in our instant response. So we give the company a call. They have shared their report with me, and it was I've also shared my insights with them. They have shared their insights with us. Shared their report with us, and what they have found in the malware and what we have found on the server was exactly the same. So we got confirmation that our observations on the Exchange server was exactly the same with what they have found through the malware online.
It's always
And
nice to have a second opinion like that, just
yeah,
knowing you're on the right track and you can contain the attack in this way.
yeah, that's true. Well, this was very happy for us, dopamine. We were very it gave us energy,
Yeah, and we also thought this was the end. That was always a nice one to have the feeling you're all done. Giving the time, I won't make a large story about this, but we didn't hear anything for a few days. But then again, there was one machine starting to pop up all weird stuff. The machine was running Exchange 2019, wasn't running on the latest cumulative update yet, but the security patch was installed. There were no indicators of compromise before that. The update was installed, so all was felt okay. But then we had to investigate that machine as well, because it kind of looked like the update was installed. It didn't give any errors, but eventually the update wasn't active on the machine. So even though it didn't fail, it also didn't protect the whole thing. So at that time, it was March 12th. The customer exchange server, we installed EDR on that as well to keep an eye on it. And it kind of starts alerting and seeing all kind of attacks coming through. And that's the moment when we start investigating to see if the exchange patch level, the executable version, eventually upped to the safe version, and it showed that it didn't. So the patch did successfully stop, but it wasn't fixed. So then we already knew that the machine had to be infected, given the fact that it was already March 13, and the whole world was like attacking Exchange machines like crazy. So the interesting part in this is we fully checked the machine, we cleaned it, we patched it, and then Exchange broke down. So since Microsoft Exchange always works nice, eventually it kind of breaks down at a single time. Shit happens. So we had to ask the team to restore the machine from backup. But you can guess the backup was made before the whole machine was cleaned. So restoring the backup immediately, we had to again examine it, clean it, and make sure when it got connected it was clean. But then again, Exchange broke down a second time. There was something we think wrong with the initial installation of that machine, and we even have to revert it before that day. And we saw at a different day whole new web shells. So the amount of web shells kind of differed from day to day, and that also indicates that there was a kind of attack frenzy going on worldwide to just dump your shell, claim your shell, and just attack those machines. It was madness to see that. But eventually we cleaned the machine. The machine was running, and we found some different things there. For example, the support.aspx files, we already seen them on all other machines. But one thing we didn't see yet is the web shells being actively targeted in requests. So when we manually again checked the whole IIS logs on those machines, and people, sysadmins know what a hassle it is to check those things, we found out that there were Python requests being made to that web shell. And we also saw that within 3 seconds there were 2 requests made to that machine with an encoded command, which was grabbed by the web shell and executed successfully. So we knew there was something more going on this machine. Something nice to see is that the EDR also triggered that. So we saw that it was being hit. There was a command being run, and PowerShell did some nasty stuff. That was another confirmation that we need to check that machine even deeper. Actually, this was different what we noticed in this path. People knowing Windows know that the www root got most times used by Exchange Server to serve its web features and default website. We saw there the web shell. Now, nothing new. We found more of them. So that was kind of what we expected to see. But there was also a batch file being placed, and that was a new one. Together with the batch file, there was an dump.zip file, which was a small file around the 1, 2, 3 MBs, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a dump.zip, which was around 18 to 20 MBs. And that kind of indicates is that the whole attack here progressed a bit further, and we need to check that out. When we edited the batch file, I kind of saw that there were a few things going on. One is that there was a mini dump being made of a process ID. The video kind of lags a little bit, so let me check to see. It was process ID 656. We eventually tracked that down to being lsas.exe. They used that with living on off the land to dump the credentials of the machine and the in-memory, as well as getting the boot key for the decryption. So we knew that there were credentials being grabbed, being dumped. We also knew that in the other zip file, there was a lot of data from the organization as well. Since the batch file showed us that they did a DS query on all human accounts from the whole organization with all properties, we found a huge file listing everything about all accounts in the organization and all the properties they had. So that's very, very valuable information for the attackers. So we knew they had credential dumps. We knew they had a dump of all the people in the organization with their properties. So the first thing we started to do is see in the logs if we could find an indicator that the data actually got exfiltrated. Because the fact that it's there, we saw more machines with web shells and stuff on it, but we didn't find any indicators the data was grabbed. So we went through all the logs with multiple people just to make sure we knew that there was no request being made to the web shell again, giving a way to grab the files, or that there was another way the files were queried directly. Since it was a web shared folder, it could also be downloaded directly. But those were the ways. Eventually, a reverse shell could also be an option, but we know that that wasn't there and hadn't been there. So for us, knowing that we couldn't find any grabbing of the files, the exfiltration itself, that kind of gave us a good feeling. But we knew the adversaries were way further on this machine.
Yeah, and when you see that the threat actor do a dump of LSAS, you know, okay, it's probably they are aware of all the passwords, and then the first thing what you need to do is change all the passwords, everything.
Yeah.
And what was the primarily reaction response from our customer?
Yeah, okay. What you said is true, because we just assumed that the data got leaked, so we just say, okay, change all the passwords, change that, just inform all the employees and organization that you could expect some form of targeted phishing attack the upcoming time. Please keep aware. But the customer was also an administrator on that machine. They do some administration themselves. So the third thing we told them is just, we resetted all our accounts. Make sure you reset your admin accounts, your domain admins, ASAP, just now. And the first thing they told us was like, it's Friday afternoon. We started the Friday afternoon drink. Yeah, I'm going into the office on Monday and we'll make sure to change it then. I was like, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change your account right now and just send your new password, which is very, very complex and you're going to hate eventually, but no way you're going to wait till Monday. So that's unacceptable. And they was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, sure. So that was kind of like, I was like, what? But then again, this is a screenshot from EDR. Here you can see that the mini dump is being forced, and eventually this flags it as a high priority attack. It can correlate that to attack patterns, and thankfully the EDR also triggered us around this, just knowing that this happened and it was detected. So the next slide, this is eventually a nice one to give you an idea of how the data dump from all the information from the customer was generated. If you're not familiar with DS query, they used it to dump the information from Active Directory. Since it's a domain joined server, you already have the amount of credentials you need for that. So they dumped like all this information. So from every person, every human in the organization, all this information and even more below, which I cut off, was dumped. So members, departments, last logins, aliases, all things like that. This is a great source for an attacker to have, even if he doesn't have the credentials. It's great to start some phishing. And then we have one more.
Yeah, our conclusion, dopamine, based on our observations and findings.
Yeah, I think it's for us. The customers weren't happy at all. They are having a downtime. They were having attacks. But then again, to be honest, I just love that the whole scenario. Learned so much, and it's kind of the same as on Hack the Box. When you finish a box and you just have that feeling from, damn, I just learned so much new stuff I didn't know before. And it doesn't matter if you're 10, 20, 30 years of experience. It's just you always learn something from things like that. Partially technical, but also the whole teamwork, the whole flow. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and what we also have learned is only having a antivirus installed on your server or machine, it isn't enough protection for sophisticated attacks. Not every antivirus program is monitoring the random access memory for wireless attacks. And the AV is not doing a behavior analysis on your machine. So what we have learned, we already knew it, but it's confirmed by this attack that only AV, it isn't enough. You need to have endpoint detection and response on your server. So it can do a behavior analysis and correlate processes and on your machine. And patching is not always good enough. When you know there was a 0-day vulnerability, the books are online, you have to do investigations and searching for indicators of compromise to make sure that your machine isn't compromised. And what we also have learned is that you have to ensure that your log retention of all your log files, in this example, your IIS log files and log files from Exchange, fits compliance and business needs. If your logs are purged on very short basis and you have to do an investigation, you are missing many insights and information from what's happened on your machine in the past. So have good retention. Then your question can be, what's a good retention? It depends on which company you have, but save log files for 90 days. I think that's a good retention. What do you think, Dopamine?
Yeah, what we see a lot is that the standard rotation of IAS is just horrible, and sometimes you just have 1, 2, 3 days of information to investigate, and that's something which is overlooked very easily. So enough adequate log space and also adequate retention of your logs is really important, especially with internet-facing machines, to at least see indicators of compromise. Non-internet-facing machines as well, but ideally you want to have a central logging mechanism to at least grab all this information, because we also found 1 or 2 Exchange servers where we didn't have the logs anymore, and you just had to restore partially parts of the machine to have in-depth investigation, but it's really horrible to do good analysis on that. So yeah, I think one of the most overlooked things, but make sure you have adequate logs available. Yeah.
And last but not least, when you are stuck in an investigation, what can you do?
Take a walk and just take a cup of coffee. Yeah. That's a lifesaver always. Yeah.
Clear your mind. Yeah. Take a walk outside in the sun. So I think this is it, Dopamine. We done.
Yeah, I think for us it was normally we were all Hack the Box. We're all thinking from attackers' perspective, and it's a great way to see what you can do on that. But for an attacker, you only need one door to access the whole castle. And for us on the blue team in daily business, we need to make sure all 100 or more doors are closed. So yeah, with this presentation, our findings around this 0-day attack, we just wanted to give you a little view in the kitchen to give you an idea what our daily business was like at that time and how we all learned from these global attacks. And since Microsoft already disclosed 2 more major critical vulnerabilities today, we might as well do a whole 3, 4, 5-part story the upcoming year. So you have content enough, Arjan. Don't worry about that. Since Exchange is being hacked 24/7, it's always we have content more coming.
There's a question in the chat. There's a lot of very positive vibes going on. Amazing presentation, top presentation. While the presentation is catching up, very good. Somebody is asking, can you share this presentation with us?
Sure.
Maybe they want to go through it themselves for their organization. We need to update the exchange.
Patch.
Yeah, you already answered a lot of questions in the chat itself while it was going on. There are a lot of people actively base 64 decoding strings.
They're all searching.
Yeah, very good. Well done. So I would say thank you very much for your presentation. It is an amazing story, and it is very nice for people to see how the non-attack side of the business is, how it works, what you run into, and how you break down your process and everything that goes into it. I think taking a walk is generally a good idea, right? Let's see if there's any other questions. Well, thank you for the felicitations in the chat and things.
CTFL really got freaky on those hashes. I see. Yeah. Props, man.
It was just fun. It was 2 minutes before we start with the presentation. Oh, should we hide some base 64 and go to text in the presentation? Oh yeah, sure, we will do.
I see one question coming up from Rambero. You were not afraid that ransomware could kick in at the customer service before you solved it. Yeah, we actually had. That's one of the reasons why one of the machines was already disconnected for that. And the other machines investigating, we were thinking about that as well, since ransomware is very nasty indeed. So yeah, that's something that really came through our minds and which was on our focus constantly. That's also the reason why we started deploying EDR as soon as possible, to also have the option to isolate machines from that tooling as well, in case shit hit the fan. Like that.
At some machines we have this able the HTTPS port from the internet to have some rest in the investigation, so that the web shell is there, but the attacker is not able to connect to his web shell, so he's not able to drop ransomware. But we were afraid for ransomware,
Especially the one with the scheduled task, since we didn't know which domain it used to grab that payload from. That was one of the things which crossed our mind. A few days later, there was a relationship between Hafnium and a new form of ransomware they got actively deployed. So they did have their own ransomware for that attack. And that really came into our minds that we didn't have to think only about data exfiltration, but a full-size ransomware was also an option. So that was a nice one.
Cool. As you guys are part of our Discord, there's still some questions. Maybe we can answer them in the Discord.
Yep.
And we'll wrap up the meetup as we're running out of time, or ran out of time.
We kind of screwed up your whole timetable on that one.
No,
sorry.
Go talk in Discord. I can go to bed.
Helaas, pindakaas.
Yes.
Nice.
So, thank you all. We'll cut out the live feed on YouTube. We can have discussion in the Discord. Applause for you guys for your work and the presentation itself.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
It was nice to show part of the kitchen.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to end the broadcast and we'll move back to Discord. Stan is already asking, is there not a Miffy story? We also still have a giveaway to do. So let's head over there.
Will do.